Your existence is, technically, a statistical impossibility. You probably think you're here because your ancestors were smarter, stronger, better hunters. That's the story we like to tell. But what if they survived because of a sickness? You already know what this feels like. You lived through one. Masks, empty streets, a fear you couldn't see. Now imagine it with no hospitals, no science, no idea what is killing you. Picture an invisible illness moving through your people. Nobody can stop it. Nobody even knows what it is. Every family loses someone. Every camp grows quieter. It looks like the end of your kind. And it should have been. Because every other kind of human, and there were others, was vanishing exactly like this. But hidden inside that disaster, something is happening. The ones who survive aren't just lucky. They're carrying a defense the others didn't have. A shield your ancestors picked up from a human species that was about to go extinct. That borrowed immunity may be the single reason you're the last kind of human standing. But it came with a price. One your body is still paying today. To understand how a sickness could save you, you first have to understand how close you came to never existing. For most of the story of life on Earth, your ancestors were not a success. They were a small, fragile, endangered kind of animal. There were never very many of them. Genetic studies suggest that at points in our deep past, the entire breeding population of our ancestors may have collapsed to just a few thousand individuals. That is not a species conquering the planet. That is a species one bad season away from disappearing. And they were not alone out there. That is the part most people forget. You are used to being the only kind of human. But it was not always this way. For most of the last few 100,000 years, the Earth held several kinds of human at the same time. The Neanderthals in Europe and Western Asia, the Denisovans further east, and others we are only now beginning to discover. These were not brutish ape men. They made tools. They controlled fire. They buried their dead. They were human in every way that word matters, and one by one, every single one of them vanished, except yours. So here is the real question this video is about. Out of all those kinds of human, why are you the one still standing? The comfortable answer is that you were simply better, smarter, more creative, more advanced. But the evidence is pointing somewhere far stranger, toward disease. To see why, you have to follow your ancestors out of Africa. Because that journey was far more dangerous than it sounds. Africa was where your kind was born. And over hundreds of thousands of years, your ancestors had co-evolved with the diseases that lived there. Their immune systems knew those enemies. It was a brutal, ancient balance, but it was a balance. Then some of them left. They walked north into a world their bodies had never been tested against. And that new world was not empty. Waiting there was a landscape full of unfamiliar pathogens, bacteria, viruses, and parasites your ancestors had never once encountered. Their immune systems had no memory of these enemies. No defense, no experience, nothing. By every rule of survival, this is where the story of your kind should have quietly ended. A small band of newcomers walking into a wall of invisible disease. But there was something else waiting in that new world too. Someone else. The Neanderthals had already been living there for a very long time. 200,000 years, roughly, before your ancestors arrived. And in all that time, they had done something crucial. They had adapted. 200,000 years is long enough to make a kind of peace with local disease. Their immune systems had been shaped, generation after generation, by the exact pathogens that were now threatening the newcomers. The Neanderthals were, in a real sense, at home in that dangerous world. Your ancestors were strangers in it. And when the two kinds of human finally met, something happened that changed the future of your species. They did not just fight. They did not just compete. They interbred. This is not speculation. It is written in your DNA right now. If your ancestry is from outside Africa, a small percentage of your entire genome is Neanderthal. You are, quite literally, part of another human species. But something else crossed between them, along with the genes. When two populations meet and mix that closely, they do not only exchange DNA, They exchanged diseases. The geneticists David Enard and Dmitry Petrov proposed exactly this: that when Neanderthals and modern humans interbred, each side was suddenly exposed to the other's pathogens. Your ancestors' African diseases met the Neanderthals. The Neanderthals' Eurasian diseases met your ancestors. Two immune systems, each blind to the other's enemies, and this is where the story turns. Because that same interbreeding did something protective. Along with the risky genes, your ancestors inherited Neanderthal immune genes. Genes shaped by 200,000 years of surviving Eurasian disease. Enard and Petrov found that the stretches of Neanderthal DNA that survived longest in modern humans are unusually rich in genes that fight viruses. That is not random. It is the signature of a defense being kept because it worked. Think about what that means for you. The immune shield that helped your ancestors survive a deadly new world was not entirely their own invention. Part of it was borrowed, handed over by a human species that was itself running out of time. Scientists have found specific examples of this inheritance. A group of immune genes called toll-like receptors, which act like alarm systems that detect invading pathogens, carry Neanderthal and Denisovan versions in many people today. Another set, the OAS genes, which help defend against viruses, came down to us the same way. These are not trivial fragments. They are working parts of the immune system you are using right now. So consider the situation from the Neanderthals' side. They gave your ancestors a defense. But what did they get in return? Your ancestors' diseases. And here is a hypothesis that researchers are taking seriously. A team led by scientists at Stanford modeled what happens when two human populations, each carrying diseases the other lacks, come into contact. Their models suggested something chilling: that the diseases your ancestors carried out of Africa may have been devastating to the Neanderthals. That disease itself could be part of the reason the Neanderthals disappeared, while your ancestors did not. Now, this is a hypothesis, not settled fact, and it matters to say that clearly. Nobody has a Neanderthal death certificate that reads "died of a human disease." Climate, competition, and small populations all likely played their part too. But the disease piece fits a haunting pattern. Your ancestors carried immunity the Neanderthals lacked. The Neanderthals carried immunity your ancestors then inherited. One side walked away with the other's shield, and the other side vanished. Sit with how strange that is for a moment. The reason you may be the last kind of human alive might not be that you were the strongest. It might be that your ancestors survived a sickness the others could not, and took a piece of the loser's immunity with them. Survival, in this story, was not about being better. It was about who caught what and who could withstand it. But remember the promise at the start of this video, that this gift came with a price. This is where it comes due. The immune system is a delicate balance. Turn it up too high, and it starts attacking the wrong things. It attacks pollen, dust, your own body, and it turns out some of the ancient immune genes you inherited are dialed high. Researchers studying the Neanderthal immune genes in modern people found that the same variants that boost resistance to infection are also linked to a greater tendency toward allergies. The alarm system is sensitive. Sometimes it goes off when there is no real threat. Every itchy, streaming allergy season you have ever suffered may be, in part, the distant echo of that ancient trait. A defense your ancestors needed to survive, still firing tens of thousands of years later inside you. And this is not the only time in history disease has done this to us. There is a much more recent, much clearer example: the Black Death. In the 14th century, a plague swept across Europe, Asia, and North Africa, and killed up to half the people in its path. Researchers studying the DNA of people who lived before, during, and after it found something remarkable. Survivors were more likely to carry certain immune gene variants. One in particular, near a gene called ERAP2, appears to have given carriers a strong survival advantage against the plague. The sickness selected them. It reshaped the immune systems of everyone who came after. But here is the familiar, unsettling twist. That same protective variant is linked today to a higher risk of certain autoimmune diseases. Once again, a plague made survivors stronger against infection and left their descendants paying for it in other ways. This is the pattern of your entire existence. Every great sickness your ancestors survived carved itself into the immune system you inherited. It saved them, it shaped you, and it left a bill. Which brings us back to something you lived through yourself. Because this is not ancient history that stopped mattering. It is still happening. In your lifetime. When a new coronavirus spread across the world, scientists did something they could not have done a generation ago. They looked at whose genes seemed to affect how badly people were hit. And in the results, they found something almost unbelievable. The geneticists Hugo Zeberg and Svante Pääbo discovered that a stretch of DNA affecting the risk of severe illness was inherited from Neanderthals. A piece of another human species, carried in modern bodies for tens of thousands of years, was still shaping how people met a brand new virus. And true to the whole story, it cut both ways. One Neanderthal inherited region was linked to higher risk, another to lower risk. The ancient inheritance was not simply good or bad. It was exactly what it had always been, a double-edged gift, a defense written into you by the deep past, still being tested against the newest threats you face. So think again about what you actually are. You are not the clean endpoint of a story about the strongest surviving. You are a patchwork, stitched together from ancestors who barely made it, and from another kind of human who did not. You carry their genes. You carry their immunity. You carry, in a sense, the memory of every sickness they lived through. The 1918 flu, which killed tens of millions, left its own faint fingerprints on the survivors' descendants. Every pandemic in human history has done this, selecting, reshaping, passing something forward, and you are the sum of all of it, the living result of every plague your line ever survived. We do not know the full story yet. Some of this is solid science, and some is still careful hypothesis. The exact role disease played in the fall of the Neanderthals is still debated, but the core of it is no longer in doubt. Sickness did not just threaten your ancestors, it shaped them, it selected them, it armed them, and in at least one case, a defense they took from a dying human species may be part of the reason your species is still here. The next time a new illness appears in the world, and you feel that old, invisible fear, remember what you are meeting it with. A body shaped by every plague your ancestors ever survived, including the ones that nearly ended them, including the ones that make you sneeze in spring, and the ones written into you by a kind of human that no longer exists. Your existence really is a statistical impossibility. And the strangest part of the whole story is that a sickness, the very thing that should have wiped you out, is a large part of the reason you are here at all, alive, breathing, and watching this, on the far side of every disaster your bloodline ever survived.